Leaving the military can seem straightforward on paper, but it often feels very different in real life. Earning a degree, landing a job, making plans for the future, and sorting out benefits all help, but they can't replace the sense of purpose, standards, mission, and close connections that shaped your daily life for years. Many veterans do not expect how much this change can affect them. My guest today, Taamir Ransome, understands this firsthand. After retiring from the Army, where he worked in EOD and special operations, he faced the same questions many veterans do. Who am I now? And how do I use all this training, this drive and pressure that I built up from my time in the military? In this conversation, we take a look at life after the uniform, why veterans need a strong pack, why it can be hard to leave combat behind, and why your next mission might just be taking care of yourself. But before we get into this episode, I want to take a moment to raise awareness for something that's important to our community, the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation. This organization is working to build a permanent national memorial in Washington, D.C. to honor the service members, families, and civilians who are impacted by the global war on terrorism. This memorial will be both a tribute to those who served and a way to ensure that their sacrifices are recognized and remembered for generations to come. If you'd like to learn more or find out how you can support their mission, visit gwatmemorialfoundation.org. Now let's get into today's episode. Hey, Taamir, welcome to the show. Really glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Absolutely. Before we jump into the conversation here, for the folks who are listening who maybe aren't familiar with you and your background and everything, can you tell us quickly just a little bit about yourself and your journey in the military?
Yes, sir. So my name is Taamir Ransome. I retired out of USASOC as a G3 counter-WMD sergeant major. Joined the Army October 2001, right after 9/11. Started off as a radar guy in the 82nd, and then got the soft bug and went EOD, stood up the regiment unit that's for EOD, and then went to the National Mission Force and never looked back.
Yeah, and I think anyone who joined that soon after 9/11, that you gotta have to imagine the motivation was, pretty much 9/11 and like, yeah, let's go get some.
I remember my recruiter calling me and saying that because they were calling everybody out. I was working construction in Atlanta at the time, and he's like, "Hey, you see the news?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "You still want to join?" Because I guess a lot of people backed out. And I was like, "Are we going to war?" And he's like, "I think so." And I was like, "Yeah, I want to join."
Yeah, I think that's probably true. That's probably one of two ways that you can go. It's like, oh wait, this is getting real. No, I'm going to back out. I was just in it for the college money. And then there's the other people who are like, oh no, hell yeah, send me. So no, that's awesome that you joined. Right after that. I remember when I joined. It was a few years after that, but it was wars were Iraq, Afghanistan. They were in full swing, and I remember the drill sergeant saying like, it's not a matter of if you get deployed, it's a matter of when you get deployed.
Right.
After joining at this point. So it's, you knew at that point you're going someplace, you're going to be doing something, just a matter of, when and where. So, it's definitely a different time period versus just immediately before 9/11 where, there was really nothing going on at that point. And it was, just a whole different world. So you said you served in the 82nd, stood up the EOD unit, supporting the Ranger Regiment, and all that. So that must have been kind of challenging, I would imagine. What were some of the things that you learned kind of during that time? What were some of the kind of takeaways for you during that time?
So I'll start with the 82nd. One of the things I wanted to do is I had no clue. There's really not too many people in my family who were military. So I didn't have any real clue of special operations or even airborne. The airborne bug from a drill sergeant, and this guy was the epitome of discipline. And I was like, he always talked about his division. And so I was like, I want to jump out of airplanes. But then when I got to the 82nd and you get to Fort Bragg, anybody who's been to Fort Bragg, they realize that you get a couple of briefs when you first get here. One of the briefs is from the Green Berets, and then they give you another brief about staying off of Gruber Road, down Gruber Road a certain ways. And I was always like, what the heck's down there? And I figured out the unit was down there. So I was like, that's where I want to be. So there's a couple other things that happened, but the biggest thing for me that wanted me to go, that pushed me to go soft was during All-American Week. One of the division sergeant major at the time said something I'll never forget. He's like, sometimes it's tradition over common sense. And for whatever reason, that didn't sit right with me. And I was like, I have to get out of here, man. These guys are going to get me killed. So I would say that from a challenging standpoint, EOD school is probably the hardest school, or if not the hardest school I've ever been to mentally. Everybody across all four services in the EOD career field, you have to be a B student. So it's not like I think the rest of the military is like 70% to pass, but for EOD school it's 85. And so any one like minor infraction you got was 8-point hit. And if it was a major infraction, it was 16-point hit, automatic failure. So it's like the hardest school I've ever been to.
Oh wow. Yeah, and I got to imagine that kind of ties into the job, right? You make one big mistake and
Yeah,
it's
right.
all over, right? So
Right.
that's not a job that you want to make any kind of mistakes. Not that any job really, you want to make a mistake anywhere, but that one is, all of a sudden you make a mistake, it becomes somebody else's problem,
Right. Yeah. The motto for EOD is initial success, total failure.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's really no other option. There's no halfway with that kind of job.
Right.
But you also made a bit of history as going through EOD, all that training and everything, but being the first Black Tier 1 EOD operator. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And the first black one, I didn't know that was the case until like somebody told me. And at one point, EOD career field asked me to do a commercial, and I was like, "Well, why?" And it was me and one of my friends, and she's like, "Well, hey, we're the only ones." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "You're the only Black EOD sergeant major in the United States." And I thought about it, and because I know a bunch of different EOD units across the world, I was like, "Wait a minute, I'm probably the only one in the world. Therefore, I'm the only one in the universe." So I called dibs on that. It was really cool. But yeah, so I was the first Black Tier 1 EOD operator in history.
That's pretty cool, and having that unique of a perspective where you're able to call the only one in the universe. That's pretty cool. But so all of that work that you did in the military, I know a lot of folks when they're in the military, especially when they join at a young age, and it's basically all they've known in their adult life, their adult working life, anyways. Then they get to that point where they're ready to hang up the uniform and transition out of the military. Gets to be a tough time for a lot of folks. What were some of the challenges that you faced during your transition?
For me, it was, and I always consider myself like the poster boy for transition, right? Like I left the military with dual master's degrees from, also left with a post grad certificate from University of Texas. I had made some good decisions, and had a bunch of properties and all that, but I didn't realize how much my identity would be affected, right? Like all I've known, and I like to use this from Shawshank Redemption, I didn't realize how much we become institutionalized. Like I didn't think it would happen to me, right? Like, so for the biggest part was like, one, I lost my purpose, my drive, and who I was, or at least who I thought I was, all in one fell swoop. And that hit me really, really hard. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. And I don't think it has to do with just, doing over 20 years. I think just the way the military trains you to fight for that person to your left or right, like that identity they give you is like so ingrained in your DNA that even if you only do 4 years, like once you lose that, it's hard for anybody.
Yeah, yeah. I've known people like you just said who have only served 4 or 6 or 8, some odd years, and it had that same effect on them as they're coming out. It's like, well, all right, now what the hell do I do? And
Right.
who am I? What am I supposed to do? And it doesn't matter really how long you served. If it was short enlistment or you did your 20 plus years, it can happen to anybody. So
Right.
and even like you said, you had lots of stuff going for you. You had all that education and all that stuff going for you getting out, but it's more than just that. It's that community, it's the camaraderie, I should say, the folks that you're with, plus the mission, the purpose that you're having while you're in the military. That all gets taken away, and now it's just you against the world, basically, right? And it's
Right.
a little different mindset. Now, stepping into mindset a little bit here, tell us about your book that you wrote, and like what it's all about, what kind of the background on it, what inspired you to write it, and all that kind of stuff.
Right. So, like I said, my masters are in data. Right? I'm a data guy. I love patterns, and I love looking at patterns and figuring out the questions that nobody thinks to ask, right? And so one of the questions, I work at a lot of nonprofits, veteran nonprofits, and the question that keeps coming up is, veteran suicide, right? Mm-hmm. And so the question that was brought to me was, why is there veteran suicide? And then I realized really quick there wasn't, no matter what we say, like people try to boil it down to one answer, and I realized it's not one answer. And so essentially the book was, one, I like to say it was a love letter to myself initially because I needed to write that stuff to get it out there. But then I realized really quick that just from all my research on and why my body was behaving or why my mind was feeling a certain way, that other people needed to hear this. And so it was a lot more than 34 laws initially. I call them laws because I'm a Robert Greene fan, 40 Laws of Power. But basically, I was able to distill everything that was going on from a veteran's perspective down to 34 different issues. That is the reason why we a lot of our brothers and sisters are committing suicide and feeling lost in the world after they finish their service.
Yeah, and that's something that I started this show basically to combat, is the veteran suicide problem that we're dealing with. And it doesn't seem to be getting better over time. You look at from the start of basically from 9/11 through current day, you look at the number of folks that we lost in combat versus the number of people that we lost at home to suicide, and the numbers are just astounding. Like, if I hadn't seen the numbers myself, I don't know that I'd believe it if someone just told me in conversation.
Same here. So I think I want to say that we've lost more since 9/11. We've lost more to suicide than we've lost in combat casualties since Vietnam.
Yeah,
like significantly a lot more.
It's significant. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so tell us about some of the laws that you've kind of come up with that you refer to them as laws that might kind of point people in the right direction to saying, hey, these are the things that might be the kind of root cause in some cases. And I know every individual is going to be a little bit different, and their reasonings and all that kind of stuff, their life situation is going to be a little bit different. But I got to imagine most people probably touch on at least one, if not more, of these things somewhere along the way.
Right. So I'll talk about the first two initially, just because those kind of lay the foundation for the book. With Law 1, it's essentially is that like your uniform is not your identity, like who you were and everything the military gave you. That was you, right? The military just gave you a really good outlet to express who you actually are. So when you take the uniform off, you're not necessarily losing the identity. You still are you. You just got to figure out where to point that weapon at, right? Like, we are probably the most finely tuned weapons there are. You just don't have a mission for it. So find that mission. The other part of it is Law 2 is you need a pack. I don't call it a tribe because I think that word is overused. I like to act in the military more to a wolf pack, right? Like we hunt, we live, we eat, we sleep together, we watch each other's backs, right? And if you're, you know how it is, man. If you're sucking at work, like, you'll get called out for it, right? But I think that one of the things that I realize is that the pack protects you from yourself, right? So if you're drinking a little bit too much or not sleeping enough, like your guys, they're going to call you out. And then you may not say anything, you may not talk about it, but it's just the right amount of call out that you need. That's one. And then I spend a few of the laws explaining to not only the service member, but the civilian on how and why, especially as an enlisted guy, the U.S. sees us, and a lot of it has to do with Hollywood, right? And so understanding that, like, we are either painted as a hero or the monster, and we're neither. Like, we're so much more deep. Like veterans are so much, like, we're deeper than that, right? So it's to me, those are like the most important things of, like, hey, it's not civilians' faults, right? Like, because if I go to get a job, right, anything they may know about the military is Full Metal Jacket. That might be the one movie they've seen. And if I'm a freaking, E7, which is the same as a gunny in the Marine Corps, right? Like, all they know is that one drill sergeant who forced to recruit into murder-suicide, right? So it's trying to educate the veteran themselves on why they feel a certain way. And then also the book tries to educate civilians on, why most veterans don't like "Thank you for your service." But I explain where "Thank you for your service" came from.
Yeah. And I certainly fall in the category where I do feel uncomfortable with the "thank you for your service," but I prefer that a hell of a lot more than the way the guys coming back from Vietnam were treated.
Yes.
They were getting spit on and called names and getting beat up and all these kind of things just because they served their country. And it's like, it's a lot of times they didn't even have a choice. They got drafted, and then they went off and did the thing that their country asked them to do, and then they come home and their country treats them like crap, and that just doesn't sit right. So I certainly prefer the thank you for your service over that.
Right.
But I get it. It's not the most comfortable thing. Some people, maybe they feel like they didn't do enough, or they don't deserve the thanks, or
Mhm.
they did certain things they're not proud of or whatever, and they want to put it behind them. And there's a lot of different reasons that someone might not like that type of thing. But it's also hard from the civilian standpoint, who they feel like there's some appreciation there, and they want to express it. Well, how
Right.
do I do that without pissing this person off? And everyone's going to have their own little quirks. Like, maybe some person's going to like it, some person's not going to like it.
Right.
You don't know that until you broach a subject, and at that point it's a little too late to take it back. So it's hard for, I guess, for everybody. But looking at it from trying to understand everybody's kind of perspectives with all these different laws. I know I don't even want to go into all of them right now, because I feel like that's why people need to go get the book and
Right.
take a look at it and try to understand what it is all about, and what might be some of the solutions to some of these problems. And I imagine that's part of the book as well, is kind of digging into the solutions, right?
Right, right. And so y'all know Joe complains, right? But and I used to, as an NCR, I would tell my guys, like, complain all you want, but give me solutions, right? And so every chapter follows up with some type of solution, right? Like, so example, I'll go back into the thank you for your service. It's not that I dislike it. I just think that it stops the conversation before it starts, right? And so instead of thank you for your service, ask me a question. I think most veterans are, not all of us, right? But I would say a good 95% of us are okay with a decent question. Like, where'd you serve, right? Like, or, what service were you in? Did you ever deploy, right? Obviously, I tell people, like, don't ask the number one bad question, like, how many people did you kill, right? There's some civilians who's going to ask that question, right? But I mean, even with those, like, it's a moment to educate that civilian, right? Like, I think the book, it's a thing of where, one, I educate veterans on, like, for guys who got out and don't think that they deserve anything from the VA, like, freaking fight for it, right? Like, you already know how to fight. You're trained to fight. Continue to fight for yourself, right? That's the biggest piece of it, right? Like, I would say the biggest part of the book is you are now the mission, right? So take that same thing that the military gave you, right? That same drive that you already have that's naturally in you, and fight for yourself, right? And then as you're fighting for yourself, educate civilians, right? Like, and because we're so disconnected, I think Mathis said it a while ago, like, America's at war, or the military's at war, but America's at Walmart. Like, so take every opportunity you can to try to educate the civilians, so that we can kill that stigma of we're either a hero or the monster.
Right, exactly. And there is a big disconnect, because I forget what the number is, but the vast majority of the population don't even have people that they know who served in the military, in combat operations. I should say, they may know someone who maybe served, didn't really go anywhere as far as like a deployment or anything like that, but they may know that, but they don't really know much about what goes on in the military, other than, like you said, through the movies. And so, and that's for a lot of people. Of course,
Right.
there's going to be those exceptions. There's going to be some folks who do know, because they had a friend or a father, or somebody in the military, and they were able to learn through that. But there's a lot of people, they just don't have a clue, and it's hard to educate people when your baseline is basically not reality. Whatever goes on in the movies is not real. There's some elements of truth in some of the movies, but for the most part, you're right. It's either you're the hero, or you're the villain, or so there's really not. It's not reality the way these movies come out, and so it's hard to recondition someone's mind, because their mind is already conditioned on something that's not even true. And how do you get them out of that mindset and then back into reality, I guess, right? So
Right.
so then when you see these veterans who are struggling, because they're like, nobody gets me, nobody understands what's going on with me, or the guys that I served with, or anything like that. It's no wonder that there's some sort of mental health issues going on in the veteran community, the military community, because they almost feel like they got no place to turn, right?
Right.
Even with the civilian doctors, who might be a good resource to turn to, they just don't feel like they can talk to them sometimes.
Well, so yeah, so you talk about the numbers, and I want to say in the '90s, after the Gulf War, something like 40% of all children had at least one parent in the military. That number's down like under 4% now,
Yeah.
for our entire U.S. population. And then to hit on the doctors, even I cover that piece in the book too. Is and there's some docs out there that are starting to hit on this, but it's still not like mainstream, if you will. So for the most part, they go, if you've been to combat, you've done this thing, you got PTSD, right? But like, if you look at the definition of PTSD, PTSD is a very important thing. So I don't want to knock that and think anybody I don't want anybody to think that I'm knocking PTSD. What I'm saying is PTSD is designed for like one incident, maybe two. So like 9/11, people who experience and live through 9/11, they have like legit PTSD. That was one like traumatic event and there's procedures to combat that and to handle that, right? What we all have, where you went through a prolonged traumatic event, like every day during a deployment, you've seen something traumatic, right? Depending on your job or whatever, right? And then you get back, you really don't talk about it, but then you sign up and say, "Hey, I want to deploy again," right? And so there's no term for that. Like the closest term to that is moral injury. But even with that moral injury, just the way it's worded, it deals a lot with like shame, and so that's still not correct. So like I don't think there is any type of prognosis or diagnosis for like what you would call what the career warfighter has, right? So and that's one of the things that I try to get out there and educate people. Like at least stop just calling it PTSD, because that is not the right thing. The closest thing is moral injury, but that's still not the right thing. And maybe they need to come up with something new for what we all actually have.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know that I ever really thought about it that way, but from you saying, about the folks who experienced 9/11 who are maybe in New York or Pennsylvania, D.C., anything like that, that nobody's going to sign up for like give me another 9/11. Like let me go do another one of those. But you do have service members who experience something traumatic in combat, and then they do sign up for send me on another deployment, and let's go do that. In a way, I don't know what the exact right answer is here, but in a way, I think some of it is you kind of get addicted to the chaos that you experience when you're overseas. And I know some folks, probably myself included, I don't know, maybe other people might argue against that, but I feel like some folks are better under pressure, under that kind of chaos. If it's not chaotic, then they feel like they're out of control. And like when the things are chaotic, then they can act calmly and rationally, and they know exactly what to do, when to do it, and all that kind of stuff. But when it's not that way, then they're a mess.
Yes. So again, the book goes into that too, right? So it talks about what you just said, right? We've all heard war is a drug and all this other stuff, right? Yeah. Well, it actually is a drug, right? So they did this study, and I cover a bunch of this stuff in the book without going too like nerdy, right? Is that essentially in combat, you are the best version of you. Like to all standards, you are the epitome of like human evolution, right? And as you're going through these things and you're doing and operating, right, your body's dropping like the equivalent of 12 milligrams of morphine into your bloodstream, right? When you combine all the adrenaline and all this stuff. So like you get addicted to that. And there was a study, I forgot who did it, but basically they showed a bunch of Vietnam vets, right? Like a bunch of war movies and footage and all that. And they would think that these guys would like shy away from it. But what was happening was that their own bodies were producing this drug that is so freaking addictive that they weren't shying for it. They were actually chasing that, right? So this is where you get the whole like come back from deployment, you're an adrenaline junkie, blah blah. Hell, this is where all the motorcycle clubs came from, right? It's because we're chasing this freaking drug that our bodies naturally produce that we only get in combat in extreme situations.
Yeah, right. And again, there's only so many ways to produce that. Going and doing those adrenaline-filled activities, skydiving, bungee jumping, riding motorcycles, real fast, or whatever. Those types of things are the things that will produce that, and even that, I don't think is going to come as close as a bullet whizzing by your head. Like it's going to be a totally different thing. You'll maybe take the edge off, but it's not going to be quite the same thing, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, but it's hard, and I don't think people understand that when you say, oh yeah, bullets whizzing by your head, or bombs going off, or things like that, people think, oh, you want to stay as far away from that as possible. But then you mention something like that to a veteran who's experienced it, and it's like, yep, sign me up, send me back in, and put me in, coach, basically.
Right.
Send me
Right.
back into it, because I want more of it, because that drug that you produce is just so addictive. And despite how traumatic it is, going back to that piece of it, uh, which does affect you too, in a negative way, it's so traumatic, but you still want it. It's almost like being in a bad relationship, with
Yeah.
abusive relationship, but it's like
Yeah.
something there is drawing you back in, and you want it even more.
Right.
And that's combat in a nutshell. It's a bad
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the way you put that, man. That's really good. It's super traumatic, toxic relationship, but you can't
Yeah.
go, you can't walk away.
And it's day after day. It's not like a one-time thing.
Yeah, you can. It sucks because like when you tell civilians like you miss it, right? I don't think only other veterans understand what you say, like what you mean when you say that. So
Right.
that's good. I like it. It's a bad relationship. I like that.
It is, yeah. So that's awesome. And I think I might have screwed up here a little bit. The name of your book, I don't think we even mentioned that. Mind of a Soldier, right?
Yeah, Mind of a Soldier. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to make sure that we at least said that in there. So if anyone's listening and is interested and want to pick up a copy of the book that's in there, I'll have a link to it in the show notes and all that too. So that'll be there. But yeah, Mind of a Soldier. It's an interesting title, interesting concept too, because there's so much going on in a lot of folks' minds, and it's so complex because there's so many different things that could be intertwined, and not any one thing is going to apply to every single person, but some combination of these things might apply to all these people, and it'll just be interesting to see when people start reading this book and taking a look at themselves and saying, oh yeah, that's me, that's what I'm going through, and okay, this is what he's saying might help me work through this, or whatever. What's the solution, basically? And it'd be interesting to see how much that helps folks, down the line. But I think the key aspect to all of this is really the desire for people to want to get better, to be able to work through these things. But sometimes I wonder, what is it in people that makes them maybe not want to work through these things? Is it I'm not worthy of being better, or maybe they're just so addicted to the way that they are, that they just are stuck in that perpetual state of chaos, that they just don't know how to get out of that. Even if you lay it all out in front of them, they maybe don't want to go down that path. That's another challenge too, I think, with some people. Not everybody, for sure, but I think there's some people who maybe are just stuck in their the way things are, and that could be a challenge.
So I think I wholeheartedly agree, and I think what it boils down to is, and it's funny, veterans are probably the worst demographic to help, right? We don't trust anybody but our own, right? So that's a reason for the book, right? Like, hey, I don't work for the government, right? Like, I support other nonprofits. I've made it to the top of anybody's like ladder. If you like, whoever wants to talk about that, like, we can, right? And so for me to come out and try to be as vulnerable as possible to say, hey, like, even me with everything that I've done and everything that I have, like, I still have these thoughts, right? Like, and I still have these issues, right? I'm hoping that that'll help people, at least, if not go get help, at least realize that they're not alone, right? Like, because it's one thing that's like, the VA is going to always say, like, go to this freaking therapy, go to this, go to that, blah, blah. Like, I've tried to do some of this stuff and it sucks, right? Like, so my biggest thing is like, knowing how vets think and how vets operate, right? Like, here's all of the tools that are out there. Go figure it out on your own, because I got it. Like, one of the things that really that the military gives us, right, is that locus of control, right? Like, that whole thing of like, we get the commander's intent, right, and we can operate. Like, you hear it all the time, right? Some freaking squad got taken out, and our company got taken out. Some privates out there like slaying dudes, right? Like, because that's just how our military is built. But then when we get out, it's like they snatch all that control away, and it's like, you must listen to this dude. You essentially get ambushed at your first VA appointment, right? It's my goal is to just, in the most understandable way possible, hey, there's 45,000 nonprofits out there. One of them can help you, right? go to the VA. Like, if you don't want to go directly to the VA, you have the, VFW, right? Like, and even I'm guilty of this, is where I always thought VFW was just for like World War II vets, right? Like, so, but no, I've been to a bunch of them out here. They're actually trying to modernize, right? But these guys know the VA in and out and do all your paperwork for you. So, like, it's just, as long as the DAV, right? Some of these organizations have been around for like 100 years plus, which is like amazing. As I was doing the research, and it's like, there's help out there. I just don't think veterans understand there's help, because you get everything you need while you're in, right? Like, all your meals cooked for you, a place to work out. You get the, pretty much wake up, work out, eat, freaking fight, right? Like, life is great. When you get out, like, again, like, there's tons of help out there. Just, I don't think the job of marketing that help, if you will, is being done properly.
Right. And, to your point, when you're in the military, that stuff is, I don't want to say handed to you like you're, a little child that needs, to be handheld or whatever, but it's just there for you. And it's the barrier to access the stuff that you need while you're in. There's essentially no barriers there. It's like, hey, you need this, go do it. Whether you need a school, you need medical, you need whatever, it's there for you. Go do it and take care of that stuff. You get out, now it's on you to go do your research. What's available to me? What do I qualify for? Do I have access to VA benefits? Do I have access to this, that, and the other? And I think part of it is just, there's so much confusion as to what you're eligible for and what you're not eligible for based on, your service and, conditions that you might have and all these things. There's a lot of confusion around that, I think, with some folks. I know when you go through that, when you're getting out of the military, they're going through all these briefings and they're telling you all these things that are available to you. And it's like drinking from a fire hose, because there's just so much stuff coming at you. There's no way you're catching it all, and it's just so much. But at some point you got to say, okay, I know I have access to something. What is it that I have access to, and what can I do? At some point you got to do some research on your own. If you didn't catch all that stuff, or at the time you're like, oh, that's not for me, I don't need that. And then you realize, 6 months, a year later, oh crap, I actually do need something. I wish I paid more attention. Well, you can't go back to that class, but you can also, use Google. It's your friend. You can go look up stuff. Your book is another resource. This podcast, why I have this, is so that there can be discussions about different resources, and people can hear firsthand from people who have used resources or created resources like your book. And that just helps people understand what's available to them. It may not be the thing for them. They may listen to this episode and say, hey, you know what, that's not for me. But they may listen to the next episode and say, hey, that's the thing for me, and that's something I'm going to go try. And so, to me, I don't really care what it is. I'm open to sharing all sorts of different resources, just so long as people are out there listening to it and trying to gather the knowledge and the feedback and everything from these resources, so that they can get the help that they need. Whatever that looks like. I don't, everyone's got their own issues, but whatever that looks like, that's what I want them to do, is figure out how to get the resources that they need. And it's hard, because we're stubborn too. As we are. We're thick-headed, we're stubborn, and we don't want to ask for help. We want to figure things out on our own. And one thing that the military did do is we gave us a good sense of problem solving. We're presented with a problem. I know when I was overseas in Afghanistan, we had some problems every once in a while, and it was amazing how many times it was like a private who came up with a solution to the problem, and it's like, oh, that's awesome. Let's get it done. And sometimes it might feel like it's a hack together solution, but if it's dumb but it works, it ain't dumb.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and that's how I frame most of the book. Is like, hey, you've already been through all this, right? Like, you've been places where Murphy kicked in and the initial plan didn't work, right? Like, and that's what this is, right? Like, nobody's coming to save us, right, but us. And so it's like, and I talk about the system, but that's the VA, DOD, like, or DOW, whatever you want to call it, as a whole. But it's nobody's fault, right? Like, again, like, the U.S. and our military is designed for war. Like, once we're done fighting a war, like, it's on us to figure out, like, what's the next step, right? And there's there's tons of help out there. Like, I would challenge everybody to just go to their local VFW. If not, one of the things I found out is if you go to your county, to that Chamber of Commerce, they usually have some type of like veteran like conglomerate there that they know, where there's all the different VSOs in your local area that's there. If you just go there and talk to somebody, like, don't even ask for help. Pretend that you're asking for a buddy, right? And see what they say, right? Like, if it's that bad, if you're really that stubborn to ask for help, go just say it's for your buddy or something. But there's tons of resources out there. Like, again, 45,000 nonprofits that are out there supporting us and trying to catch us on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. There's so many resources out there. There's no reason that we should be in this position where we have so many people falling through the cracks, and in a way, it feels like we're failing all these people.
Right.
Not in a way, it does. It feels like we're failing them, and they deserve better. And
right.
Whether that's from the VA, whether it's from the nonprofit community, whether it's from all these different organizations that are out there supporting veterans, you're right. The messaging just isn't there. We just don't know enough about what we don't know, and so you very often can fall in that trap of feeling that, hey, I'm in this on my own. Nobody else is out there giving a damn about me. It's just me, and sometimes the weight gets to be too heavy to carry on your own, and what are you going to do with that? And if you think that it's all on you and it's all on your shoulders, you might break, and that's obviously not where we want people to be. There definitely are resources. It's just a matter of getting the word out there, getting that education out there, and so I'm grateful to be able to have conversations with people like you who are out there doing the work, trying to raise awareness and come up with solutions to problems, solving these things, and actually helping people in a meaningful way, not in a self-serving way, like you're thinking that you're gonna get rich off of writing this book and helping folks. I mean, obviously I want you to sell as many copies as you can, but that, I'm sure that wasn't the intention when you sat down to start writing.
No,
it was like the financial impact.
I'm actually, and it's funny, I'm actually trying to partner with a bunch of nonprofits now to where we can give the copy out. Like, they can get sponsors to sponsor the book and give copies out for free, right?
Yeah,
but like, if I released it for free, if I was a millionaire, I would, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not there yet. So
no, that's great, and I'm glad that there are people like you out there who are doing the work and putting in the legwork to really figure out what the solution is. Using data, like you said, that's an important piece, because it might feel good that, hey, I'm doing something, but if it's not the thing that we need, then it may not necessarily be helpful. Not to like knock those people and that they're doing anything bad or anything, but it may not be the thing that is needed. And so when you look at the data and you figure out what is actually going on and what can we do to stop it, what actually works, that's, I think, what we actually need. And so this data-driven solutions is something that is, I think, seriously missing in a lot of the conversations. It's a lot of it's more like, from what I've seen, more like feel-good type stuff.
Correct. Because it's easy to throw out numbers, right? But like, one of the things I realized, it is funny. My grandma used to say, you can't BS a BSer, right? And I think veterans are veterans are the greatest BSers out there, right? So we can pick up on BS really quick, right? So I didn't want this book to be from a point of like, this is how I feel. Like, no, this is what I know. Like, and then please, like, fact check me, right? Yeah. Like, there's going to be parts in all the like feedback I've gotten so far. Like, it's all been positive. Like, dude, you hit it right on the head. You hit this right. But the fact that I can back that up with numbers and say, hey, again, thank you for your service. Where'd that come from? It came from Vietnam, right? Because how Vietnam vets were, but the country overcorrected. So now we just have this one phrase that everybody's like uncomfortable with, right? So, but like across the board, like you said it, like, hey, you even said you don't know the numbers, but like there's something about going to combat, something about combat that makes you feel a certain way, right? And it's like drug. No, it is a drug. Like, it is facts that it is a drug. There's already been studies on this. So like, to use those numbers and use my skill set as a data scientist to say, hey, I've pulled in all this data, I've unnerded it all, right? So it makes sense to our community, right? So then you can go, you can read the book, or you can give it to your spouse, or whoever, a hiring manager could read it and be like, holy crap, like, this is what's going on with these guys, these girls, right? And hopefully affect some type of change.
Yeah, absolutely.
To get the conversation started.
Sure. Yeah. And sometimes that's what we need. It's just being able to talk it out, and then maybe, putting our heads together, a few of us getting together and really talking it out and thinking about what the problem is and possible solutions. That's where you come up with good answers to these problems. And there's no dumb answers that you're not going to come up with something that's totally dumb here, but anybody who's coming up with some sort of potential solution will maybe inspire some other even better thing in somebody else who kind of like pieces certain things together in a certain way in their head, and it may come up with that one solution. But having these conversations, and a book like yours is one of those things that can be the conversation starter to
Right.
get people together and actually start talking about that. So truly grateful that you wrote that book, and that it's out there for folks to check out. Before we wrap up, where can people go to get a copy of the book and find out more information about you and kind of what you do?
Yes, I tell anybody, especially if you're a vet, hit me up on link, Taamir Ransome. And then the book is on Amazon and Goodreads and a bunch of other different platforms. But Amazon's my main platform right now.
Awesome. And like I said, I'll have a link to all of that in the show notes for folks so that they can check it out, click through, get a copy of the book. Definitely get a copy of the book. I think just based on this conversation so far, it's like, exactly what we're missing. It's that missing link in all of this. We have so many good resources out there, so many people with their hearts in the right place. Maybe they're not doing the things that are needed, but their hearts are there. And if
Right.
we get that message out there of like what actually is needed, then maybe those hearts can be swayed in the direction of the thing that's actually needed. And we can, I don't want to say waste time like it's a bad thing, but you can spend your time more wisely doing the things that are actually needed, based on the data. Look at the facts that are out there. And so that's what your book does. And I'm super grateful to you for having written it, and thanking you also for coming on the show and sharing your story here. I definitely appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Absolutely.